Session Blood.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Session Blood, episode 31. And another week and another big round of skirmish events.
Yeah.
And
I think, the skirmishes are growing all over the world. I think there has been over 300 players that have joined last week, which is getting pretty good. But yeah, we have a skirmish of our own coming up, so I think that's what we'll focus our episode on what we're going to play in the Blitz skirmish in Whangarei.
yeah, and I've announced that I won't be playing Iris, so we'll see what I have to do.
The options are getting there.
So, on the topic of skirmishes, I think our shout-outs today, we kind of just want to give a big shout-out generally to the winners of the skirmish events. There's been some really big ones as well, and it's definitely not easy taking out a 50, 60 person event, even 24 when you have really solid players. So we've seen them all around the world. We've seen Taiwan, Europe, North America, Australia as well. I wanted to give a particular special shout out to Dante Delfico, a Canadian player. I've been sort of keeping track and seeing he's put up some really good results. I think he came second in one last week and actually won one or two the week before as well. But in particular, I saw this week he won the biggest skirmish event of the weekend on Ira. And, it's the deck that's in everyone's crosshairs, and he's still succeeding with it. And that's quite cool. We might have a look at a few of the cards in that list a little bit later.
Yeah, and it's definitely a name that's been popping up more and more. I kind of saw it in that Red Riot Games
that's true.
Event as well. So it's definitely a player to watch out for.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Dominic Rodriguez, who played Wizard. It's great to see Kano still in there. I still believe that Kano is just the most powerful hero in Blitz, and it's great to see it getting some plays in the overseas skirmishes. We definitely saw a bunch of Kanos here in Auckland for the calling, but it's good to see some representation in the overseas events as well.
Thank you, Dominic, for not making us look dumb. But all these props to Kano. It's where's the Kano?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so like Carol mentioned, so we're going to be playing in a Blitz event this weekend. I just want to briefly just talk about, I played a skirmish event last weekend or the weekend before, which was WTR Sealed. It's quite funny, I hadn't played a whole lot of WTR Sealed, but luckily for me, I opened quite a good Bravo pool. Just had lots of decent blues. Nothing totally broken, but just a really solid Bravo pool. I had my staunch responses, my unmovables, all my sync belows and stuff, and I just anathosed my way into the top 8 and was promptly eliminated immediately.
As soon as the draft started, things got a bit harder.
Yeah, so I've got my cold foil hero. Ooh, now I've got a draft. This actually requires a bit of skills. So shout out to Michael Collins as well, who actually managed to beat him in a close game in the Swiss, and he got his revenge on me in the top 8 playing Brute. And that's a tough deck to draft, I believe. So
definitely.
Really good Magic player here, and so it's good to see him giving Fav a bit of a go. So shout out to you.
Yeah. And I'd be keen to give just a quick overview of WTR Sealed. I feel like overall, obviously depending on your pool, depending on how many class cards you get for each class, that can kind of give you a great indication of what to go for. But I do feel like there are some things to watch out for, which is I feel like Bravo is the kind of most consistent choice to pick, just because of how great Anathos is, and all you really need with Bravo is just some solid blues to get it going. I do feel that's something you have to watch out for, is that number of blues. So between you want at least 10 to 12 blues for that deck. That's kind of a bare minimum.
Yeah, even ideally somewhere 14 to 15. And on top of that, your blues, you want them to be that classic sort of, they cost 3 or more. They pitch a blue, and ideally you have the Guardian class ones that block for 3 as well. Things like your blue Crush Confidence, your blue Debilitate, are all just really solid cards to put in that deck. But on top of that, if you see cards like blue Barraging Brawnhide and blue Wounded Bull, those are cards, they do block for 2. So they have their additional effects, but they do block for 2, so they're not as good. But again, just being able to pitch 2 cards to the to the hammer sometimes and come in for 6 if you can combine it with something else. So one thing to watch out for is not just piling in all your good red cards, because sometimes you can fall into a trap of like you have all these great Guardian red cards, and then you put it all into your deck, and you kind of realize after round one, I've got like 11 blues, and I'm never able to play them all.
You draw 3 reds, and you end up pitching 3 cards to Anathos. It gets into this. I feel like you can fall into that trap a little bit.
Yeah, and cards like Blue Immovable, of course, another like premier card because it has that whole Anathos thing. It's also defense reaction, bails you out of tough situations. So, yeah, I mean, I think playing sort of like a grindy. If your pool suits it, if you're not quite sure what to build and you see those decent amount of like 3-cost blues, it's not a bad thing to fall back on in combination with a few like defense reactions and a few premier attacks just to like push it over the edge with Dominate. Yeah. Pummels are amazing as well, like a really great trick just to have.
Yeah, I do feel it's quite kind of out of the 4 classes, the easiest class to get into. It's kind of like if you don't know what to do, if your pool's completely even in terms of class cards, that's probably the safest bet. With Brute, the main thing you'll want to watch out for is those attacks that have 6 or more of an attack, so you can activate your Intimidate hero ability whenever you discard cards. I feel like that's a big one, and also yellow cards are quite effective just because you can pitch them to Romping Club. For Warrior, I feel like the main kind of thing you need to keep an eye on is those cards that give your weapon go again, which is Driving Blades, Warrior's Valors, and Opening Refraction Bolters is really massive for that class.
Bolters is huge in that deck,
Yeah, and
I guess as well, just going back to Brew quickly, like we mentioned, Barraging Broadhide and Wounded Ball, those are good generic fillers in your deck, particularly yellow copies, because they pitch for yellow, like Carol mentioned, for your Romping Club, and they can trigger your Intimidate effects. So, if it can be quite difficult to play sometimes, Brute, but if you have like, some Barragings or some big attacks and you've got those 6 power things, it can work quite well.
Yeah, the thing about Brute is none of your attacks have any on-hit triggers, so on-hit abilities, which means it's a class that purely relies on just raw damage. So every other class you kind of have to make sure to block some of them to stop some effects. With Brute, you just kind of have to push through damage and then set up those like big intimidates to finish your opponent off, which isn't the easiest thing to do.
And just on Warrior as well, backing up what Carol said, you want those cards like Warrior's Valor, Driving Blade. If you have Bolters, that's can be a big sign towards it, but also you just want to make sure you have like a critical mass of attack reactions in order to like push those weapon hits over the top, or on your off turns being able to like surprise, throw in 2 red Iron Song responses and stuff like that.
Yeah. And lastly is Katsu, which usually, I mean, on paper it looks like probably the worst class, purely because you have the 3 combo lines, and you're very unlikely to open decent combo pieces that match well together, which it's where kind of why Katsu goes from being not very effective and sealed if you go for that aggressive style of play that relies on the combo pieces, whereas in draft you can kind of select them, so it's kind of the combo lines become more powerful. But you could also play kind of like a mid-range control version of Katsu where you don't really rely much on the actual combo pieces to put pressure, and you just kind of chip away with Kodachis. You could even play like a 35, maybe like a 40.
Yeah,
40
like get the Katsu pile going.
Yeah, and you just block and just rely on those Kodachi chip to get through damage, because that's just so hard to block. And if you're blocking non-stop, you're kind of saving up your life total to be really high. If you have like decent defense reactions and stuff like that, you can maintain your life total while chipping away with this annoying source of damage for you against your opponent.
Yeah, because things like your we talked about Bravo wanting to have those 3-cost blue attacks, 3-cost blue cards, and Katsu. Ideally, you have things like Whelming Gust Wave, Rising Knee Thrust in blue, 0 cost, so you can pitch the Kodachis for go again. And they also block for 3, and if you have the combo lines, you can discard them. So then you can look at other cards, generics that block for 2, like Scale or Battlescape, for example. Just ones that...
Wounding Blow.
Wounding Blow is great.
For 3.
Yep, exactly. And just these cards that you can pitch away to Kodachi and also block within a pinch. And then you have other cards, things like, Razor Reflex is good for chipping through damage. Even big attacks like Regurgitating Slog, maybe with a Slogism in there somewhere.
Yeah, even those like Red Raging Onslaughts and things. Going Kodachi, Raging Onslaught is just such a strong turn.
Yeah, and it's one of those strategies that like it catches your opponent off guard. They feel everything's alright until like, turn 9 where they're suddenly on sort of 7 or 8 life and you're still on 15 and you're going, all right, let's go.
And those Kodachis just become so much more threatening.
Yep, and then lastly, I suppose, before we move on to Constructed, like if you do happen to open like the Dream, you've got your like 3 red leg taps and your Rising Knees, like going full aggro combo ninja is extremely powerful, but just be wary that like you do need quite a good pool to do that. If you've got like your 4 Surging Strikes or your 4 like yellow leg taps, but you've got 1 Rising Knee or 1 Gust Wave, it might not pack as strong a punch as you think.
Yeah, and if you do have like even just 1 or 2, like if you have like a red leg tap and a red Rising Knee thrust, you have to be quite actively aware of that combo. So for example, if you kind of draw the Rising Knee thrust early, maybe pitching it to a Kodachi, even though it's not the most efficient play, can be a way to save it for late game, for later on. Or
taking a little bit more damage in order to build up this combo for later on.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I suppose we'll move on to Constructed, or Blitz Constructed now, because not everyone will have a big opportunity to play Welcome to Wraith. We just want to cover that briefly. Now, I suppose I just wanted to maybe start off by looking at a couple of the interesting cards I thought I saw in Dante's list. Because one thing we've talked about how the IRA lists were tending more towards just these 6 defense reaction builds. So just running 6 Flick and then running more sort of mid-range aggro cards, like, Life for Life, all that kind of thing. And we were kind of wondering if, with the rise of Dorinthia in particular, these Go Tall builds, would there be a spot for maybe more defense reactions coming in order to get around that?
That's something that, you see more and more players in the IRA lists going back towards that defensive control builds, just because if there isn't that much Kano representation and you're not worried about these wizards, you might as well protect yourself against the Go Tall Dorinthias who are trying to punish you for removing those. So yeah, more and more people have been putting in the kind of yellow unmovables, red unmovables. It's a card that you can stop in a mirror game. You can stop a drone for 7, and you're just so much better protected against things like the Go Tall Dorinthia. Yeah,
because the issue with cards like yellow and red unmovable is like you can use them at times in the mirror, but they're not always the best. I mean, you can use them on things like a flying kick or a drone.
It's not very efficient, and like you can't. It's not the easiest card to pitch as well, just because of how Kodachis work.
Exactly, and like against Wizard, obviously they're not great, but Dante didn't run those in particular. But what I did really like about his build, I saw he had 2 Springboard Somersaults and a yellow Sink Below. We're huge fans of Springboard Somersault. Carol was onto that card very early, and I was a bit of a hater for a little bit, and then he brought me around, and I've loved it ever since. It just gives you a bit more utility in the Wizard match as well. It's still a cracked ball essentially in Wizard, but it's not like a worse cracked ball like a red Sink Below, which is just totally dead. And being able to have just those additional, so then you have the red Flick and your springboards that can block for 4 from Arsenal. And obviously he played that to great success, and I just thought that was quite a cool sort of meta game call almost. Recognizing that in the online meta there have been a lot more warrior players, and to give yourself a bit of extra game against those without sacrificing a whole lot against the Wizard matchup, maybe a little bit here and there. Looks like it paid off quite well, and they're not bad in the mirror either. Things like Springboard can block a Soulbeat Strike, can block a Life for Life if they're playing it.
Yeah, or even, you block for an E-Strike for 3, Springboard, make that clean 7 so you don't...
don't link any damage.
Yeah, don't stop those mask triggers and things like that. Even the flying kicks, you can fully block it. And if you need to, you have that protection against things like Razor Reflex to an extent.
Exactly, and things like the 1 yellow Sink Below, I feel like I quite like running 1 off sometimes when like you can catch people up, particularly if you like perhaps you hide it with the Lightning Strike, or you just, a lot of your defense reactions are gone. They're kind of counting through. They're like, okay, all the springboards are gone, like all these are gone. They've only got one blue flick black left, and then suddenly like the yellow sink below comes down and stops the razor for lethal. So I just wanted to sort of spotlight that quickly and say, I feel like Dante's obviously played a lot of Ira, and I can't say I've seen a whole lot of his previous builds because sometimes there's a bit of delay in decklist. So, but I thought that seemed quite well suited to the meta. So that was cool.
And I just want to kind of backtrack because, like last week there was so much emphasis on this Go Tall Dorinthia, and I haven't seen any Ira players or many Ira players use things like Unmovable in particular. And the reason why I brought it up in the first place is because I just published an article on Channel Fireball about how Bravo is really well positioned for this metagame. And now I'm having massive second thoughts. Because I'm just because the whole idea was that because there's no Kano, you don't really have to run pummels as much. And things like Staunch Response and Unmovable and Blue are just so convenient against the Go Tall Dorinthia, and it gives you such a good game against Go Tall Dorinthia. But if there's Iris out there playing Unmovable, you're screwed. Yeah. I didn't even think, that's the thing, I didn't even think about it because my kind of game plan for Ira is to set up like a big crippling, basically have a turn when you go Emerging Dominance, drop a crippling into your arsenal, and then basically use 2 cards to block whatever they play. You have your Seismic Surge token. Next turn you can use 2 cards to go for crippling for 14. But which is great because Ira has such limited armor. But Unmovable just completely shuts that plan down.
Yeah, so I guess it'll be interesting. We'll see if more Iras. I mean, I haven't seen a ton of Unmovables. I've seen sort of some being played here and there.
Yeah.
I suppose that is something.
I'm just getting way too worried about.
Yeah, but I guess it is a thing to keep in mind. If you see sort of more and more warriors pop up, then that can be an issue with playing decks like Guiding that can sort of fall victim to their kind of collateral damage to these strats bought in for warrior, and it's like I'm playing a Bravo. Oh, good thing I have that red Unmovable and fire. But yeah, it's the thing about, I suppose, Dorinthia as well. It's the deck that I feel once people play against have a bit more experience. It's not to say Dorinthia isn't doing well. I mean, it's been still winning tournaments. I think Rob Seigel won another tournament on Dorinthia recently. But yeah, I think it is a deck that once people have a bit more experience with, not to say it's easy, but you can start to identify some of the play patterns. Because I wrote an article myself dealing with Dorinthia and Blitz, which I think is out soon. So if you're struggling, you can check that out. I think it's out on Channel Fireball at some point. But yeah, I suppose moving along.
So what are you going to play, Kieran? What are you going to play this weekend?
Sorry, just before that, I was going to say it was cool that we saw Kano manage to take out a tournament. And yeah, I think we saw 4 Aether Flare builds, so 2 red and 2 blue Aether Flare. So that, really just going all in on this heavy burn strategy. Obviously, if you catch your opponent off guard with Aether Flare into snap back or Aether Flare into anything off a Kano at the end of turn, it's great. I suppose we'll just have to keep an eye on Kano going forward and see how it continues to perform in the upcoming weeks of Skirmish. But
true,
I kind of believe like you that it's a deck that it's a bit of a sleeping giant. I think it's going to come out and perhaps take out a few more Skirmish events.
Yeah, I mean, just being able to burn someone for 14 damage with a setup combo that doesn't require that much to get going, I feel like it's just insanely powerful.
Yeah, and actually the final card I wanted to spotlight I saw on a list was in Taiwan, the second place player. Sorry, the name escapes me. Maybe we'll pull up the name again. But I saw the person who came second was running 2 red Dauntless in their Dorinthia build. Now that's a card that I feel has kind of fallen in and out of favor a little bit. So the one people's issue with Dauntless is that, particularly if your opponent has 3 counters on Tunic, they're able to still just use that to pop off a sink below, or probably more likely.
Does it say Roy?
It is. Say Roy. Apologies if we got that name wrong, but yeah, big shout out to Say Roy, because I thought that was quite cool tech, because in the top 8, I think there were something like 4 warrior players, but there was a lot of Ira in that tournament as well. I think Ira's the most played deck. And again, I think that's a good example of metagame identification, saying Dauntless is the card that against decks like Wizard or whatever, it's just +3, so it's not the best. But against Ira, particularly if you catch them with multiple defense reactions and things like that, it's a card that they've got their blocks calculated, and now if they don't have the 3 counters on Tunic to be able to use it, now they're having to like pitch cards from their hand to use defense reactions, and
it's just good card advantage.
It's just great card advantage. So I think the Ira actually ended up winning that tournament in the final, but still, that's not to take away, anything can happen in these games. I still thought it was quite cool.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the good point to bring up about Red Dauntless. Like, it's a great warrior card that punishes really defense react heavy decks, but you have to make sure that you don't play it out when your opponent has a counter on the Tunic, because it's just so easy to play around then.
Exactly, and you kind of want to try time it when you've identified that they've, based on their play patterns, that they've got a defense react in Arsenal, or when you're like a few turns into the game, you haven't seen any defense reacts yet, you're like, it's highly likely based on the stats that they've got it in here. Again, it's going to be better against some Ira builds than others. The builds that are more mid-rangey, running sort of 6 defense reacts only, you probably have a lower chance of hitting it. But against perhaps a deck like Dante's that we saw, which he played to great success, but things like Red Dauntless, when they're running 9 defense reacts, suddenly become like a bit more powerful. Decent chance to sometimes hit them with like defense reacts in Arsenal and in hands. And if you've got that and you combine it with something like, Supremacy and multiple attack reactions to back it up, it can really just lead to these really punishing turns where it's like, not Dauntless.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess that's sort of a roundup of some stuff we've seen in these skirmish events. And big shout out to LSS for, if you haven't seen it, you can check it out on fabtcg.com. I've really enjoyed reading sort of the skirmish overviews. I think there's great coverage. It sort of puts it into a nice, easy to read package, and they've got deck lists and everything up on there.
And exactly, you have kind of all the information there, kind of like an overview of what's going on, because it's really hard to gather all that information from Facebook pages and whatnot, and you have it all in that kind of nice, easy package.
Exactly, because we follow the Facebook and like Discord and things like. Did I just say the Facebook? Am I an old Facebook? Am I an old person? On the line. But so we sometimes look at things on like Facebook and Discord, but even with that, sometimes it's hard to like find the deck list or find what's been winning. You just kind of see the occasional thing pop up, and then it's buried under all this other content. We just want to give a shout out to that and tell you, if you're struggling, you can check it out there. But moving on, I suppose, going back to what you were saying, so we're in that spot that probably a lot of players are in, where we've got an upcoming skirmish event, and like at the time we're recording, in about like 2 or 3 days, something like that, and I don't know, I'm not 100% sure what to play. Like,
so I was just thinking about it, and I think I've made it pretty clear how worried I am about Unmovables and Ira. Now I'm just kind of second guessing everything that I wrote in that article, but I'm going to double down, and I think I'm just going to commit to Bravo.
I think Bravo's a cool
big
deck.
Boy's back.
The big boy, the old man of Welcome to Wraith.
He's back.
So I feel like that's quite a cool choice, and I'm sure, I believe you consulted with or collaborated with Kale on your article about Bravo. I'm sure he'll be able to give you a few tips and stuff if you need it.
And luckily for me, Kale won't be there, so
nice.
So I won't have to play excruciating Bravo mirrors.
Yeah, that's what he thinks until I turn up with the
Yeah, but I think the idea is still the same. Just play the red emerging dominances against Ira, play those out, smack them with a huge crippling, and if it gets to late game, hope to get a nice righteous cleansing to get rid of their drones. Especially, hopefully they're in the same vicinity. But
that's huge. If you get rid of the drones against Ira, like even getting rid of one of them,
you can actually grind them out, which is pretty much impossible at the moment with drones.
Yeah, and which is. That's the thing as well. When you're playing Bravo against Ira, I mean, from the Ira side, if you have kind of a bit of experience playing that matchup, or like perhaps you've played against Bravo and Classic Constructor before, it's not exactly the same. But I know from personal experience playing against Kale, like I was fortunate enough to escape with the win at the calling just by like the skin of my teeth, I feel. But it's very easy to start to the game. You think the game's going fine, but then you kind of realize that they're setting up they're setting up their perfect pitch order for like this Dominator Crippling Crush at the end, maybe with Crater Fist, so you can't block it. And it's easy to fall into the trap of just like, maybe you've got multiple defense reactions in hand, so you decide to throw one out on the Anathos attack, and then it's getting towards the end game, and they're looking through your graveyard, and you're like, ooh, they realize that I've only got one react left in my deck, and so, and I hope, I hope it does it. I hope Bravo. I hope you take out a few Aras along the way, and
my biggest focus,
you put some respect on his name.
I want to verse the Warriors because I have a feeling that
it's a good matchup, right?
I think so. On paper it seems great. I mean, you have something like a Staunch Response, which is a blue defense reaction that lets you have a 3-card block that blocks 8 damage, and you can play it from Arsenal. Doesn't trigger Reprise. So on paper it looks good. In theory it looks good, and I'm gonna do what I did at the calling and just commit and
do it live.
No practice.
Yeah, and
practice for the week. No.
and that's the thing. Like against Wizard, you've got that pretty good side plan of just running a ton of blues. That's the thing that
I mean, I'm gonna be cutting the pummels.
Yeah,
because I feel like it's in that particular deck you rely on blue so much that you either run the pummels or you run the emerging dominances. I feel like it's hard to fit both in.
And that's one of the issues we've brought up in the past. Why Bravo's in a bit of a weird spot, because the game against Ira, like to my understanding, I'm not a great Bravo player, but from talking to Kale and stuff, that it becomes much better with the emergent dominance, but it becomes very, very, very difficult against Wizard if you don't have the pummels. So, I mean, maybe you can just hope to dodge Kano. We haven't seen a whole lot of it, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, just don't play Kano.
And who knows, you come against someone like me on Kano who, like, I think, I can play anything. Kano seems pretty...
I'll bluff the pummels.
I'll pitch some blues and then realise that, like, there's actually a fair bit of skill in that deck. And
maybe I'll cut Remembrance. I don't need it.
Yeah, you don't need it. What does that do? It doesn't block. It doesn't pitch for 3.
Exactly. Bit of a liability against Warrior.
Probably the worst super rare in Wild Wraith. So. Jens, on my side, I'm, kind of not totally sure. Like, I was thinking about playing Claw's Brute, but I haven't played that in so long, and I feel that takes, like, a bit of practice and dedication to play well. Generally, your game plan can be sort of you just play a bit conservatively and block towards a big Blood Rush Bellow turn with your claws, with like ideally with Barraging Beatdown backup. But sometimes it's a bit easier said than done.
And I just feel like it's not that great against Goatol Dorinthia because you don't have defense reacts really except for Reckless Swing, which really limits your ability to block. And it's just so hard to play against Dorinthia when you don't have defense reactions. Like, I feel like playing defense reactions just makes the game so much easier and so much you just feel safer. Whereas when you're forced to start over blocking and you're forced to kind of take these chances of like, ooh, are they gonna like push through over route, or are they gonna Twinning Blade sidestep me? Like, taking these risks just becomes very, very bad.
And as we always say, like, Dorinthia has so much armor as well, and like on Brute, on your big turns, you rely very heavily on having like the full 5 cards, or at least 4. And that's the thing, like that deck, when we were sort of testing a bit for the calling, we were really heavily focusing on the Ira and the Kano matchups. And, whilst they weren't like horrible, we weren't confident enough. But I think there was a moment when our testing we were kind of like, wait, like what about Warrior? And we're just like, ooh, like, there won't be that much Warrior, right? And then we're like, oh, actually, there's some very good Warrior players out there. So that was kind of my mind. But I think a deck that I might actually go back to is old trusty, old faithful Dash, Induction Chamber Dash. So this was a deck that...
Damn, that's gonna beat me, probably. Guys.
Maybe. We'll see. But that's a deck that's, like, early on, or throughout kind of some of the early Blitz season before the calling, I, like, put a lot of time and effort in trying to get right. I think you would have seen me, like, I was testing against you, and I was testing against Ira players a lot. The big sticking point for that deck is it just feels like really, really hard against Kano, like near impossible. I tested with my friend Rohan, who's a great Wizard player, And I just tried all these different versions of the deck. I put in the Dissipation Shield to try like stop their setup on whatever. But you just get stuck in this in-between spot where like you can't put enough pressure on them to actually force cards out of their hands. If you commit all your cards, you give them an opportunity to burn you. And if you play super safely, like the game seems fine for like 5 or 6 turns, and you're like, oh, I'm running out a few threats, I haven't taken any damage, and then suddenly you take 8 damage, and then another turn you take 10, then 12, and you lose.
You just kind of like pitch and block all the damage, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna burn you for heaps, get rid of all your cards, and then on your turn, like pop lands, probably Kano out a few tomes, get like a 5-card hand and burn you when you have nothing.
Like, I feel actually like, the Kanos, they always just get really lucky against me.
They always get lucky.
So if I wasn't an unlucky person, I'd feel pretty happy with that matchup.
Yeah.
So, but like we're kind of in the mindset that like, people aren't respecting Kano, so we'll just kind of maybe like pretend it doesn't exist. And
maybe I'll play Kano. I'm like, really?
No. But what I want to
the best thing about Kano is just to pick it up a day before the tournament.
Yeah, no practice. It's like Kano, no skill. You just go down to 1 and you Storm Striders.
It's really easy.
Really easy deck. Yeah. But as far as the dash deck goes, so I put a lot of time in it. Eventually just put it to one side because I even felt the Ira matchup was quite difficult. You would think your induction chambers can outvalue their Kodachis, but like it doesn't always work that way. They're really good at, they have on-hit triggers. They can force you to block. It's really hard to force them to block outside of Command and Conquer when they don't want to, which is a bit of an issue in that matchup. But I think what I might do, and I want to give a shout out to Callum, our teammate testing partner Callum Giddens, who's kind of caught the dash bug, the dash fever, and he's been working away at this list, like, trying out a few new things to get it to work, and it's kind of like rekindled my interest in the deck, and I thought maybe I'll just give that a go, because I feel maybe the way to do it is we just sort of, cross our fingers, say, Kano isn't real, Kano isn't real.
That's what I'm doing for this
Kano isn't
tournament.
real. And then just build the deck, sort of more heavily tune it towards decks like Dorinthia and Ira. Because I think
I feel like that's the way to go.
Yeah, because the thing is, one of the issues was like, when you're playing against decks like Kano, if you're like putting all these like defense reactions, and like we say all the time, they're very much dead cards, or like life gain things like Sunkiss, Sigil of Solace. Sigil is fine, but Sunkiss is kind of decent in like Ira and Warrior because it allows you to like catch up sometimes when you need, or like to stay in the game while you set up your chambers. Against Kano, it just feels a little bit dead when you draw the Sunkiss and you're waiting to pitch it on their turn. It's like, well, it's not 3 life now, is it? But I've got that Fork Lightning coming for 14. It's like, we'll prevent 1. But I think there is a way to build it like much more defense reaction heavy, and put in a bit of
defense reactions and boosts for the aggro. Just kidding.
Yeah. But I think there is a way to build that deck to, if you just discount Kano entirely, then I think if you're just taking towards Ira and Warrior, there is a way to make it a bit better. Maybe cards like you were mentioning, like the old yellow unmovable, so against Warrior, and just so I can randomly bust it out against Carol and knock him out of the tournament. But,
oh man, I'm probably not going to play Bravo now.
But I think you can go really heavy towards things like, 2 red Sync, 2 red Fate, 2 Springboard Somersault, and then even put in like yellow Syncs and stuff like that. And then you have your red Sunkiss, your red Sigil of Solace. You set up your chambers, maybe even put like a drone or 2 in to give you a bit of grind out potential in the very late game. Another thing I kind of quite like doing is changing up your deck a bit where you're not really relying on boost, just giving you options to play around cards like Heron's Flight. And like does seem a bit strange, because it seems a bit strange to be playing around 1 card, but the problem is like we see more and more Ira decks running Heron's Flight. I think Dante might have even had one in his list.
I think so, yeah.
It's such a great card against decks like, we've spoken about before against Ira or Kano that only play one thing, so they only play attack actions or they only play non-attack actions. In Dash, traditionally, you have very few non-attack actions. You have like Pour the Mold and like Spark of Genius, which often you've already played out, and
locked and loaded.
Yeah, and like locked and loaded sometimes kind of thing, like in your chambers, which don't block obviously. So you're very open to those cards. The other thing is things like Find Center, which you quite often in certain builds, like, you don't have a good way to block that out, because, like, you know, if they go full Kadachi, Crane Out, Spine Center, like, there's no way you can block it, but you don't want them to be out, you don't want to let them just go, like, one Kadachi, like, Crane Out, Spine Center or something like that, and not have a way to block it. So, basically, I like running cards, things like Teklo Voshin's Workshop, so it's just, like, a 0-cost blue non-attack action blocks for 3, getting things like Pour the Mold, Locked and Loaded. Sometimes I like running cards like Raging Onslaught and Brutal Assault blue. So these are cards that they're just solid blue cards that block for 3, but also in a pinch, like sometimes in Dash you really need to manage your resources efficiently, and it sucks when you've got a hand, you know, of just like 4 blue cards that you can't really play out for any damage. So cards like Raging Onslaught and Brutal Assault can sometimes be a bit of a like release valve, particularly in the late game where they've probably, you don't want to use it early when they've got the defense reactions to give them value, but when they've just sort of run them out over the course of the game because it's Dash and like you don't need to block anything really, or they block your red zipper hits. Sometimes if you put the pressure on, you're able to go like pistol hit, load up your chambers, play out Raging Onslaught for 5 damage, or play out like a Brutal Assault for 4 damage. So just like, I don't know, we'll try.
I feel like, I feel like people just don't expect it. Like, getting hit for 5 just seems like out of nowhere can take you out by surprise. It's basically like a red zipper hit.
Yeah, it's like a red zipper hit, but it costs 3.
Yeah, and you have so many blues, you don't really care.
And there's definitely arguments on both sides. Sometimes it's not worth the trade-off because, like, by doing this, it really limits your options to go, like, a red zipper hit, red 0 to 60 game plan, and, like, in a pinch where you really need to hit that boost. Like, you know, in the list that, like, I'm considering running stuff like that, like, when you need to hit that boost, like, you throw up a prayer to the Fab Gods and say, like, you know, I'm probably like 40% to hit this, but come on, one time.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you like track your pitch order a bit like that, it makes it like sometimes a bit easier. But you know, if it's early or it's been a long day and you've just kind of lost track.
Hope for the best.
But the good thing is, like, what you do is when you're running out the zipper hit, you just kind of say, okay, all right, now I'm pretty sure, like, okay, I pitched this, so this was here, this should be on top. You throw out the zip hit, and when you hit, you're like, exactly as I thought. And if you miss, you're like,
good gameplay.
Yeah, and if you miss, you just like, I guess I was one card off.
I'm saying the song in my head is wrong. pitch away.
I remember my whole deck. So, yeah, that's probably, I don't know. I'll probably have a go at something like that. I won't be playing Ira. Maybe I'll just have a go at Dash, see how it goes.
I was actually just had this idea. Old school romping club Reiner, just grind it out.
Oh, like a throwback to our old Nationals deck where you know, none of this clause nonsense, right? You just get your 6 Barragings.
Yeah, you run the defense react, you have 2 sinks, 2 springboards, goodbye warrior. You know?
Yeah, goodbye. That's it. See ya.
Yeah. That's easy.
Like a yellow unmovable or something, and then like you just do the classic, you block with your cards, you run out of potion, you like hit for 4 with the club, and then eventually you just run out all these barraging beatdowns. Wow. You know, like you block it out, you survive on 2, you're like, alright, like Blood Rush Bellow, barraging beatdown, you've intimidated their cards, you come with Romping Club, they say, alright, I'll take 14, I'm on 6. And then you lose.
25 minutes. Well, that's the first time he dealt me damage.
Yeah. But one thing I think about Skirmish is, like, for us, in New Zealand, we have the luxury of having, like, we've had a lot of competitive play events. We have, like, all these armories we're able to go to. So for Skirmish events, I feel it's good. You know, we have the opportunity to try something new without the pressure. Because the thing is, I totally understand for, like, international players, particularly in, like, areas in the United States and Europe where your competitive options are limited because of, like, COVID restrictions and things like that. Like, I'd be playing my full power deck to, like, you know, try and establish a name for myself and like, doing my best. Like, for us, we have a bit of luxury that we can sort of not take it seriously, but if we go along and, you know, I'm coming back next week and saying, like, you know, it turns out like 8 defense reacts and all this life gain leads as a recipe for like a 1-4 in Dash.
You
it's
just
all good.
spend like 35 minutes slowly dying.
You know, my opponent's going like, oh, like, you know, I walked past my opponent after the game, I see him talking to his friend, then this noob was running Teklo Voshin's Workshop. He would have won, but he boosted away Raging Onslaught.
Nice tech.
Nice tech, bro.
Hey, we're still up there in terms of elo, you know.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm still keeping it real, you know. Yeah. I'm like, you know, I'll go 2-3, but I'm like, oh, well, if you look me up,
I'm at the Collie top 8.
Yo, if you look me up on the ELO leaderboards, it shows Brutal Assault's pretty good.
Oh, it's gonna be a good one. I don't know. Right now, I'm just like, maybe I should play mid-range brute, but I've done that mistake so many times before.
So far, Carol's he's going to play Kano, Bravo, mid-range brute.
I feel like one of the 3, maybe something else.
You know, I feel what Carol should play personally. I think it's 2 of like the dark horses in the format, and that's Go Again Guardian and Ranger Trap Control, which he told us a game about, and then. You know, like, I was like, oh, I'm going to work on Ranger Trap Control. And then, like, 2 days later, he's like, oh, it turns out, like, 6 traps isn't very good. You can't want that.
So, yeah, I ended up cutting all the traps, and it made the deck a lot better. It still was Rangers, so it was pretty average. But I almost stalled out against Ira, but... yeah, lost anyway.
And my dream, like, my last random rogue deck that, like, you know, if it comes to me in a bit of inspiration, is rocking out. It's everyone's favorite deck. It's fun, it's fast, it's good interactive gameplay. It's Cavdeen.
Yes, do it. The Cavdeen special.
It's called Cavdeen Special, aka How to Ruin Someone's Day by Going to Time.
I'm talking 6 unmovable. I'm talking 6 sing below.
Yeah, I'm running 6 sinks, 6 fates, springboards, unmovables.
Come at me, Dorinthia. I've got my Talishar.
Yeah, and you know, you probably won't win, but maybe you won't lose.
Actually, yeah.
Like, I really put my thing to the test. I was saying in my article about draws, like, I'm confident that I can play in a competitive format and not go to time. It's like, that'll probably get quoted back at me when I'm playing Cavdeen. Oh, time left in the round. Oh, there's 3 minutes. Okay, we're both on 16 live. Alright, but I guess that, I suppose, largely wraps up the main focus of the episode today. You know, we just wanted to run through some of the skirmish events, give shout outs to the international players who are rising up through the ranks. You guys are awesome. I'm still really enjoying all the streams people are doing. Can't wait to see what comes out in like the next round of skirmishes and everything.
Yeah, and definitely tune in to our results next week when we top 8 with Cavdeen and Bravo.
Yeah, and you know, I guess final thing, like a couple announcements. We also have got back in because we know it's been a little while since we've done a gameplay video. So that's been one of our things we've been trying to get around to because we know people have enjoyed those. So we do have our special guest Callum Giddens, who I'm working with him to get a couple of gameplay videos out there. The idea is sort of so we're trying to give some high-level gameplay, but in kind of like a more casual, fun format, you know, talking a bit of trash to each other. And it's a bit of a grudge match. Kind of knocked me out of the calling, so, you know, I got to show him his boss.
Yeah, exactly.
And finally, was there a special announcement that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'd like to. I actually joined the team at LSS.
Wait, what?
And the development team. So I'm now officially a developer of Flesh and Blood.
What? Which is awesome. Like, I feel Carol's going to do an amazing job. He'll be a great benefit to the team. You know, who else there is suggesting Go Get Guardian?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the Timmy of the group, just suggesting these outrageous ideas like, hey guys, we should do this. And everyone just looks at me strange, being like, yeah, this is the wrong TCG, mate.
Yeah. Or, you know, Carol will be in there, will be like, oh, what about this card? And, you know, probably the other developers been there for a while will say, yeah, that sounds interesting. Right, there's a shredder over there.
But I've definitely been trying my hardest to come up with some great card concepts for, just some whack, crazy ideas. And so far to very little success, but I'll get there. Yeah,
so I just want to give a big congratulations to Carol. Like, he is humble, but he's designed some like very good decks over the years. Like I always say, like the deck I ended up playing at Nationals was like 99% designed by Carol and taught me how to play it. So I think he's going to be a great member of the team, contribute a lot to the game, and, you know, maybe throw in a few ideas that could work in and
definitely.
And help things out going forward.
In general, I just feel like going from being a player of the game to kind of the development side is just such a big shift, and there's so much to learn. So I'm definitely doing my best to pick up as much knowledge as I can, and create and make sure to give you guys the finest flesh and blood in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, it's it'll be good because now, like, if there's a card or a deck I don't like, I'm going to be on the phone 2 a.m. Hey, Carol, fix induction chamber.
Oh, here we go.
But yeah, so as far as Session Blood goes, like, we're still going to be doing the podcast and stuff going forward there. Maybe like a couple of things in the future that will like kind of adjust to the format and everything, but we'll work on those details later. But for now, congratulations, Carol. Stay tuned, and thanks for tuning everyone in. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
All right, bye.
Bye.